Welcome to the Knackly training video on how to put executors, and this could also apply to trustees and guardians, in your estate planning document. What I've done is created an example of the output that I'd like so that you can see, kind of make some inference. Yours may be similar to this, it may be slightly different, but based on our experience is that if you're doing single successors, this is pretty close to what we've seen pretty regularly. So how are you going to go through and set this up in Knackly? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example, and this will also be in the text below on the support page. If you look at this, you can see that I've got a list of personal representatives. So if I'm going to show you what it looks like when we go through an example, then I'll walk you through how to set it up. So this first one, we're focusing on this personal representatives. After this, I'm going to show you an option for co-representatives. So I've got my personal representatives. I can go through and add as many executors in a list as I want to. I've got the drop-down list of people that I've entered as children, client. If I have a spouse, it will pull in their information. So with this, I can go through, check. Basically, I'll just exit out of here so I can go through and say, all right, John Jones, Mary, and Mark Smith. And if I go through and create the document, you can see what Knackly just created. So it looks exactly the same down below as it does up above. Okay, so let's talk through how we go through and set this up originally and some of the elements in here. Our first step is, in this case, I'm going to go to the designer online, and I'm going to go to, I've got my will options here, and I'm using a will model. So I've got my will model. I've already created this, but it's called personal reps, and it's got a question prompt. It's got a list selection, and then I've used potential agents, which is a formula that we've created that combines all of the client, spouse, and everything. And this potential agents is right here. So you've got client, if they're married, the spouse, otherwise we don't put anything. We're going to filter for children that are over age 18 and any other parties. So that's what we're going to put in there. The way I would set this up is I click add new variable. I'm not going to actually do it, but I would do a list of, and I would do a selection, and then I would write in my name. So now I've got that set up and it's ready to go. Now I can go to the document and I can insert it. And I'm just going to recreate this down below to kind of walk you through the process so you can see it. What we're going to do first is I appoint. So I'm going to go over here and under will options, which is where I put it. I go to personal reps, and I'm going to insert a list. I'm going to do it without punctuation. If I had punctuation, put commas in, and I don't want that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the end list to right before the period, and then I'm going to delete this. So now I've got John Smith, and I can just go to my personal reps, and I'm going to go to full name. And if I want it uppercase, I could just click the three dots next to the text, a little menu, and I can put uppercase. Okay. Now, the next thing you see is this index equals 1. Why do I have that? If you think about a list, so if you have John Smith, Mary Smith, and Mark Smith in a list, And if we come back here, let's go into here. You see it says 1, 2, 3. So this is the order. So this is the length of the list. And what this index does is it says, depending on where I'm at, it just kind of goes through each one at a time. If I'm at 1, I want to put in this language as personal representative of my last will and testament. So that's the language I want the first time. Now the second time and every time after, I don't want to say of my last will and testament. I want to say as an alternative personal representative. And so the first time it goes through, it says, oh, I've got index 1. I'm on the first person. So I'm going to use this language right here. The second time it comes in, it's going to say, oh, I'm on the second person. So it's going to skip this language and go straight past the else and into the end if. So let's go ahead and put that in. So in this case, just scroll up. In this case, I'm actually just going to type it. It'll be faster. If underscore index equals 1 as personal representative of my last will and testament, and then I'll put else, and I'm just going to still from up here. And then and if. No period. Then I'm going to put right here, in this case, I am going to use my if just because it will give me a start. If underscore index less than reps blank. And let me explain what we're doing here. Okay, so this one becomes a little bit different because in this case I now have language that basically that we want it this. If John Smith is unwilling to serve, unable or unwilling to serve, I need to be able to accommodate that. And as it's working through the list, I need to put that in. So what we're doing here is we're saying if I'm on number 1, and I know that there's a list of 3 people, which is the will options personal rep, it will return a value of 3 or 4, depending on how many, or 2 in the list. Just depending on how many you add, just remembering back to 1, 2, 3, whatever this totals up to. If the index is less than, so whichever one, then I want it to bring in some information. So if, so I'm going to bring in John Smith. Again, I'm going to do upper. Of course, Word's not being very kind to me right now. Is unable or willing to serve in this role, I appoint. And then you're done. So this looks odd when you're looking at it from a, it looks undone. But when we run through it, what happens is this is the first time we go through. So I've got, let me just show. Make this bigger. So the first time I run through this, I'm going to have John Smith. I appoint John Smith, if he's the first one, as personal representative of my will. And in this case, John Smith is the first one, so it's going to put in this language, and then it's going to skip to here. Now it's going to say if 1, which is what we're on, is less than 3, then I'm going to add this other language. If then John Smith is unwilling or unable to serve, I appoint. Now what's going to happen, because it's part of a list, is I'm going to now, it's going to repeat this whole paragraph again. And so it's going to say, it's going to move on to number 2, which is Mary Smith. And you can see that the list starts here, so it's actually, you see I appoint right there. Mary Smith, if index equals 1, which it now equals, index now equals 2, it's going to skip this else as an alternative personal representative. And then it will go if index is less than the length, so now index is 2 because we're on Mary Smith, and the length is 3. So if index less than 3, then if Mary Smith is unable or unwilling to serve in this role, I appoint, and then we loop through here again, and we go to Mark Smith. So Mark Smith, it doesn't equal 1 because that's Mark Smith we're on number 3. So we'll do the as an alternative, and then if index it is less, in this case it's 3, so the length is 3 and the index is 3, so that's not less. It ends right there, and then we've got the period at the end, so it will put in the language that you need. So that's how you go through and do a single one. We're going to do a separate video and you can look that up for co-executors, where we're going to walk through the next example where we're using co-executors. Thanks for watching.